Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at arh.noaa.gov, getting updates to our forecast there. Check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out. You can also call our weather info line 1-800-472-0391, get updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. Taking a look now over the state at the advisories that we do have out. So starting from St. Lawrence Island, going up the west coast towards the Point Hope area, and then all across the southern part of the Brooks Range, down through Fort Yukon area, into the central interior and Tanana. Those are all winter weather advisories for blowing snow, which means your visibilities could drop to 1/2 mile or less. And those are all out until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, with the exception of the central interior down by Tanana. That one will expire here around 6 p.m. tonight. So in all those other areas, watch out if you're outside for any of the blowing snow. Really going to reduce visibilities, and it will be windy as well. Another thing to note here is that down by McCarthy, we do have some problems at the Kennecott River. There was a glacier-dammed lake release that has caused a lot of the river to become open water again. So if you're out there snow machining, watch out by the river. It is not safe to go across that. No more ice in a lot of locations. Again, that is the Kennecott River down by McCarthy. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we'll watch over much of the Gulf here. We do have multiple low pressure systems moving through, one here in the northern Gulf, bringing in some showers to areas along the coastal part of the state there, but more rain more solidly down by Kodiak. We'll watch this again down by the Panhandle area with some of that southerly flow. You can see with the cloud cover coming in there. We do have a lot of rain coming into the area with some more snow in those more interior locations and further to the north. Out over mainland Alaska, we have some higher clouds out there over the central part of the interior. But if you look along the Arctic coastline, you can see that darker shade there that was moving in, some lower stratus and fog coming in over the Arctic coastline. And then down into the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, we again have multiple low pressure systems moving through here through the Bering, one down south of the Aleutian Islands, bringing in a lot of showers and lighter precipitation to these areas. More rain as we get into the central Aleutians, and then more snow in the Bering and way out west there by Shimia. So taking a look now at our weather current for today, we do have some snow showers out there in the western Aleutians, some isolated areas of snow showers out in the Bering Sea, Pribilof Islands, some rain for the central Aleutian Islands extending out towards the Alaska Peninsula, and then some more rain there by Kodiak. Not much in the southwest unless you're near New Stoyahawk, and we do have some snow showers out there. And up along the Arctic coastline, we do have some fog up there, and then some snow just along the coast down towards that Tin City area. And now we'll take note, we do have the high pressure up to the north bringing in some of that fog there, but we also have all this larger area of low pressure to the south, and in between that, if you look at the black lines there, those isobars, they show us that we have that tighter area of pressure there, and that's producing all those stronger winds that are bringing up those blowing snow conditions. So that's going to ride all the way through that southern part of the Brooks Range, northern part of the interior there, out towards the St. Lawrence Island area. And we're not having any new snowfall out in those locations, but there is enough snow on the ground for those stronger winds to blow that up and giving us the blowing snow. So then down along the southern part of mainland Alaska, not a lot of new precipitation, but staying off in the northern parts of the Gulf. And then down in the Panhandle, we do have a lot of rain there, mixing with snow as you get closer to the Haines and Skagway area. Then for tonight, that southerly flow continuing for the Panhandle area, bringing in more rain and some snow as we get into those more colder locations. And then parts of the northern Gulf Coast mixing with snow there as well. And as we get closer towards Valdez, just going to be all snow there. Kodiak going to be warm enough to keep the rain. And then in the interior, a chance for some snow out there. Should be pretty light in those locations throughout much of the interior, up towards the Yukon Flats as well. And we're going to continue to see those blowing snow conditions all the way along that southern part of the Brooks Range, out towards Point Hope, and then down the coastline there to St. Lawrence Island. All along the Arctic coastline, we are going to continue to see the fog overnight. And as we drop down into the Bering Sea, just some lighter snow showers out through the Bering Sea and into the Aleutian Islands as well. A little bit warmer out there by the Alaska Peninsula, where we are going to see some rain and snow. Then into Wednesday, we do have another front coming up from the south, bringing in a mix of rain and snow to the western Aleutian Islands, continuing to see the lighter rain and snow mix for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. Cold enough out over the Bering to keep the snow showers for the Pribilofs. And then some rain along the Alaska Peninsula. It's going to continue all the way along the northern Gulf Coast with that southeasterly flow, bringing in a lot of moisture there. And going to start to see some of that creep over into the Cook Inlet area. Should be lighter, but should also be snow. Then for much of the interior Alaska range, all the way up there through Fairbanks, we are going to see some snow showers there. And continuing to see that blowing snow now mostly from Bettles and to the west down towards St. Lawrence Island, especially in the morning hours. That's where that will be the strongest. And then all the fog starting to dissipate Wednesday as we get further into the late morning hours. Down in the Panhandle, we have another front coming up, but before that even gets there, we are starting to see the winds pick up, bringing in some more rain, and going to continue to see the snow mixing in those colder, more northerly and interior locations. As we move into Thursday, that low is starting to already die out, but bringing in continued southerly flow, bringing in a lot of rain to the Panhandle, and still seeing the snow in places like Haines and Skagway. Along the North Gulf Coast, a little bit colder there for Cordova, going to see a rain and snow mix, but as we get to the eastern parts of the Kenai Peninsula, more snow there. Much of the interior should be pretty clear in terms of precipitation until you're up by the Yukon Flats. Going to see some lighter snow up there. And in the western parts of the Arctic coastline, some snow showers. Then even on Thursday in the far western parts near Point Hope, Kivalina, Shishmaref, down by St. Lawrence Island, still going to see some blowing snow conditions even on Thursday. All the way around Norton Sound, we are going to see some snow, but in the rest of the southwest should be pretty clean until we get down to the Alaska Peninsula, where we are going to see some rain. And then the system out west starting to push in more, bringing even heavier rain and snow to the central and western Aleutian Islands, and some lighter snow showers out through the Bering Sea, including the Pribilof Islands. Taking a look now at our temperatures as of this afternoon at 2 p.m. Down in the Panhandle area, anywhere from the mid-30s to the mid-40s, warmest as we get closer to the Gulf. And in the south central part of the state, mid-20s to right around 40, again warmer as we get closer towards the Gulf. 39 degrees there for Kodiak, and then a little bit colder there, Glen Allen, -6 there. So we move up into the interior part of the state, single digits for the most part. Delta Junction a little bit warmer, 14 degrees this afternoon. And Arctic Village a little bit colder there, -17. Well below zero all the way along the Arctic coastline. As we move out towards the Kotzebue Sound area, below zero for the most part. A few places a little bit warmer. Kotzebue itself is at 5 degrees, Kivalina 2 degrees, and right around 10 degrees for the Norton Sound area. As we move down into the southwest, right around 10 degrees for the Kuskokwim Delta area. Right around 20 degrees for many of the locations around Bristol Bay, getting warmer as we get further to the south, and then getting above freezing as we get into the Alaska Peninsula, all the way along the Aleutian Islands, and then in the mid-20s for the Pribilofs. For our lows tonight, going to stay pretty much the same for St. Paul there, 25 degrees tonight, but just below zero now as we get into, or just below freezing as we get into the Aleutian Islands for lows tonight. Down into the 20s for the Bristol Bay area, single digits for the YK Delta area. single digits to just below 0 along the Seward Peninsula area, staying well below 0 along the Arctic coastline, getting down to as low as -25 for Dead Horse, and right around 0 as we get into much of the interior, into the 20s as we get into the south central, and then staying above freezing in the Panhandle and only getting down to 40 as we get into the southern portions. So we move into tomorrow's highs, getting up above 40 for some of the locations in the Panhandle, mid-30s in the more northerly locations. Just below freezing for the south central, Kodiak a little bit warmer, 40 degrees there. Single digits for much of the interior and staying below 0 along the Arctic coastline. Around the Seward Peninsula, just below 0 to single digits on the Norton Sound side, and then into the teens to mid-20s as we go further down the west coast, and then getting back above freezing for many of the areas along the Aleutians, with the exception of the western Aleutians getting just to freezing. MVFR conditions all throughout the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, more IFR conditions as we get closer towards the Bering Strait. Along the Arctic coastline with the stratus and fog, we are going to see some MVFR and IFR conditions there. And then those low pressure systems bringing in the precip along the Arctic coastline, MVFR and IFR conditions with more MVFR for the Panhandle. For the passes, Anaktubik should be VFR for tomorrow as well as Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill should both be VFR, but on the eastern side we are expecting to see some more MVFR conditions. Rainy Pass should be VFR for tomorrow, as well as Windy and Isabel Pass. Mentasta Pass also expected to be VFR, and Tanita Pass. And Portage will be getting progressively worse from the western entrance, where it will be VFR down to IFR on the eastern entrance. Chilkoot and White should both be MVFR throughout the day. Looking at our freezing levels, we can see some of the warmer air being brought up by those lows in the Gulf, bringing those warmer conditions out over the Panhandle, and then our surface freezing line extending out over the southern part of the Bering Sea. For our icing, starting here just to the south of the Norton Sound area, between 3,000 and 5,000 feet, going through the southwest, getting up to as high as between 6,000 and 10,000 feet as we get closer to Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island, then out over the Panhandle between 6,000 and 11,000 feet there. For the jet stream, we'll start off west, 145 knot jet coming in from that westerly direction just to the south of the Aleutian Islands, getting up to as high as 180 knots as it shoots off to the south. And then as it comes back up towards the state there over the Panhandle, 135 knots, and then exiting out to the southeast. Mainland Alaska, not really seeing a lot from the jet. So we drop down to 9,000 feet. Southeasterly flow getting up to as high as 70 knots headed towards the Panhandle, but those quickly drop off as we move inland, getting down to 20 knots right there on the other side of the Panhandle. That's going to be pretty similar along the coastline. All the strongest core winds is going to stay just along the North Gulf Coast, dropping off pretty quickly as we get over the main part of the state. 25 knots over the eastern part of the state, pretty weak, only around 10 knots for much of mainland Alaska. Then out over the Bering Sea, flow moving around our low, getting up to as high as 45 knots over the northern Bering, then 15 to 25 knots over the Aleutians. Down to 3,000 feet, again, our strongest winds over the northern Bering up to as high as 50 knots. Northwesterly flow, 15 to 20 knots over the rest of the Bering and Aleutian Islands. Then out over the Gulf, we have flow anywhere from 25 to 70 knots. Again, strongest right there in the corridor, right along the Gulf coastline, and then dropping off really quickly down to 15 knots as we get over the Panhandle. Then out over the mainland part of the state, we have that strongest core winds, 30 knots, getting up to as high as 40 knots, where our blowing snow is also just to the south of the Brooks Range there, which takes us to our turbulence. So as we start in the southeastern part of the state, we'll note that all this below 6,000 feet is going to start further to the south, and as we move throughout the day, the winds are going to pick up, and that turbulence is going to push further and further to the north, especially in the evening hours. We are going to see this more broad area extending up through much of the Panhandle. Similarly out here for the western part of Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula, the strongest of that turbulence is going to be in the morning, and this whole area is going to push and expand out, where it's going to be strongest in the evening out there by Lake Iliamna. And then as we move up over the mainland part of the state, this is going to stay pretty much the same throughout the day, extending out from the Fort Yukon area out through the western part of the interior Seward Peninsula area below 5,000 feet there. If you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Cherry.
And I'm Forrest Kirst, a commercial pilot.
And today we're going to talk about an experiment we're doing using a small aircraft where we've mounted a sensor package to the aircraft to measure temperature, humidity, and pressure, as well as elevation and longitude and latitude of the airplane. And with the package, we're going to sample the local winter inversion here in Fairbanks, Alaska. And an inversion is where you have the surface atmosphere that's closest to the land is colder than the atmosphere above it, which is the opposite of normal conditions throughout the year throughout North America. Forrest, maybe you could tell us more about how a pilot experiences an inversion during the wintertime.
On the ground during our pre-flight, it's very cold out this morning. It's minus 28 centigrade, which is about minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So doing our pre-flight, it's extremely cold, hard on the airplane, hard on the people. For flying at the colder temperatures for doing these experiments, we're somewhere between minus 20 and minus 40 degrees. So we have to dress for that temperature inside the airplane as well as when we're outside of the airplane. When we're doing our pre-flight, we have to be extremely careful not to damage the plastic parts on the outside of the airplane. Extremely careful not to touch the metal parts with our fingers because we'll get contact frostbite. And we have to be real careful just with everything because it's just so cold. We have to dress as if we're going to be outdoors the whole time, and we use the aircraft heater to make it comfortable in our clothes and so we can see out the window. When we get the airplane running and we do our takeoff roll, we have increased engine performance and increased lift because of the colder, denser air. So we get off the ground earlier and have a better climb rate. When we reach the inversion layer, quite often the windows will fog up. The airplane's performance will decrease slightly because it's warmer air, produces less lift, and it produces less power from the engine.
When an inversion is present, air doesn't move anywhere, especially it doesn't want to move up. And so the classic look there is the steam out of the power plant or automobile exhaust, any kind of wood smoke or such, will come out of a chimney and then just flatten out and not move up. And if it moves horizontally at all, it's very slow, just creeping along. When you see that kind of lack of air movement, especially when there's clear skies, the sun is maybe low on the horizon, that is an inversion day in interior Alaska.
The reason it is so cool in the far north during winter is that the incoming radiation is at such a low angle. Now, as the atmosphere begins to cool in late fall, we start to get snowfall, which causes the land surface to be white, and light colors reflect incoming radiation right back, which causes additional cooling. And it's the reason we have a persistent inversion from late fall through early spring here in Fairbanks.
To get a radiation inversion to form, you need clear or mostly clear skies. You need no wind or very little wind down at the surface. And you need to have the sun under the horizon or high noon in December such that even if the sun is up, it's so low it doesn't really feed in any energy. When those three things happen, you lose heat to space from the surface of the Earth, but you're not getting any new heat in. And you get a very cold layer of air hugging the ground, cold, dense air that just lays down in the bottom of the valley. That's the classic radiation inversion setup.
So as we do our experiment with the aircraft, we're going to use a similar instrumentation package as is mounted on the standard weather balloons. We're going to measure temperature profiles, relative humidity, and pressure. And we're also going to tie the sensor package into a GPS unit, a global positioning system unit, so we know where the aircraft is located relative to the topography. So now I want to tell you about the instrument package that we're using on the aircraft. First of all, we use a NiCad 12-volt battery to power the data logger and the instruments. The data logger records the output from the meteorological sensors, which here include a temperature and relative humidity sensor and a pressure transmitter, which works like a barometer to measure atmospheric pressure. This particular one is going to plug into the static port in the aircraft, which also helps power some of the aircraft instruments. Finally, we have the Global Positioning System computer, which measures the latitude, longitude, and altitude of the aircraft. This one has an accuracy of about 10 meters, which is perfectly fine for what we're trying to do here. Here's a picture of our temperature and relative humidity sensor installed on the aircraft. So this is an FAA-approved plate here mounted to the window. And we want the temperature sensor mounted towards the aft of the aircraft so we don't get air rushing in and it has a chance to equilibrate to the environmental conditions. And then finally, our pressure sensor is connected to this static port in the airplane, which again just measures the ambient pressure of the atmosphere where it hits this little hole in the plane. That's piped back into our pressure sensor inside. So one of the things that we're going to go out and do today is that we're going to attach the sensor package to the aircraft, and then Forrest is going to take off from Fairbanks International.
To get repeatability for the data, we flew in and out of Fairbanks International, Nenana Airport, Ladd Army Airfield, and Eielson Airfield. So we do a very slow climb up through the inversion layer, climbing at about 100 feet per minute. Just very slow climb to the top of the inversion, find out where the ceiling is, and then once we're at the ceiling of the inversion, we do very slow porpoising up and down through the inversion to see if it's stable, if it's got different characteristics throughout it. Then we get to the next airport and we do a very slow descent into the airport at about 100 feet per minute, all the way to the ground.
Welcome back. We'll take a quick look at the ice edge. The main thing to note here is that with all that flow out of the northeasterly direction, starting to push off a lot of the heavier ice there, the more thick ice. So even though we all have full ice pack, as soon as you get past the shore-fast ice along the coast, anywhere from Norton Sound all the way down the rest of the coastline, it is pretty thick there, less than a foot in most locations. So be careful if you're out on the shore-fast ice. It may look like the normal thick pack out there, but a lot of it is really thin now with the main pack getting pushed even further out to the west. For our main marine forecast here, we'll take a look down in the southeast. We have a flow out of a southeasterly direction, becoming more easterly as we get further to the north, as high as 40 knots in the south, and then northerly direction in the northern part of the inside waters, 20 knots there. Some higher gusts in the central part of the inside waters and again near the Yakutat area, with seas getting high as 15 feet in the southern parts of the Gulf. As we move into Thursday, flow going to pick up with that core wind strongest right along the coastline, 40 knots out of a southeasterly direction, pretty strong 30 to 35 in the inside waters as well. And now all areas around the southeast are going to be gusty here on Thursday. Seas getting up to as high as 21 feet in the southern parts of the Gulf. For the south central area, flow all the way from Cook Inlet down through Shelikof Strait out of a northeasterly direction, 25 to 30 knots there. Then out of a more southeasterly direction coming in from the Gulf, around 25 knots. Moving into Thursday, you can see our stronger core winds becoming more northeasterly along the coast there, 40 to 45 knots, seas as high as 18 feet out in the Gulf. And then through that corridor from Cook Inlet down through Shelikof, 20 knots up north, getting up to as high as 35 knots in Shelikof Strait out of a northerly direction. For Wednesday in the Alaska Peninsula, out of an easterly to northerly direction there, 15 to 20 knots with some freezing spray up towards Bristol Bay. Seas highest on the Pacific side up to as high as 6 feet there. Then on Thursday, out of a more northerly direction now, anywhere from 15 to 35 with the strongest out closer towards Kodiak with those winds coming in from Shelikof Strait there. Seas as high as 13 feet, again strongest east of Chignik. As we look in Wednesday for the Aleutian Islands, in the eastern parts out of a northwesterly direction, 15 to 20 knots there, becoming more northeasterly out by Shimia, as high as 20 knots there, 9 feet for seas. And as we move into Thursday, flow becoming more easterly, 40 knots, and becoming kind of chaotic as we move out further to the east out of a southeasterly direction, becoming more southerly, and then westerly as we get closer towards Unalaska Dutch Harbor area. Up to as high 20 to 25 knots there. Seas highest on the Pacific side, 10 feet. Northeasterly flow through much of the west coast with some freezing spray in many of the locations until we get further south to the warmer waters by the Pribilofs, and as high as 35 knots around St. Lawrence Island and west of St. Matthew Island. Then on Thursday, flow going to be primarily the same but a little bit weaker here, 30 knots out there by St. Lawrence Island, and then getting down to 15 knots as we get closer to the Pribilof Islands. Still going to see some freezing spray in the more northerly locations. Along the Arctic coastline, weaker flow 10 to 15 knots along the Arctic coast. As we get to the western locations, northeasterly flow 30 to 35 knots. And then on Thursday, going to see those stronger winds there, 30 knots, have a northeasterly direction, and then 10 to 15 knots along the rest of the Arctic coastline. Quick recap for the state. A lot of precipitation coming in from that southerly direction for the southeastern part of the state. Primarily rain, but some colder locations going to see some snow. Rain and snow mix around Prince William Sound, some rain for Kodiak Island, lighter snow showers throughout much of the interior, but we do have winter weather advisories for blowing snow all the way from Fort Yukon area through much of the southern part of the Brooks Range out towards Point Hope and down to St. Lawrence Island. That's going to be in effect until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Then some fog along the Arctic coastline. We have some lighter snow showers throughout the Bering Sea making their way down to the Aleutian Islands, and a rain and snow mix for the Alaska Peninsula. Similar for the Bering Sea snow out there, but starting to see another front bring some rain and snow to the Aleutian Islands. Then snow through a lot of the locations throughout the interior, but blowing snow conditions from Bettles and to the west down towards St. Lawrence Island, with some rain all the way along the Gulf coastline. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.